Good afternoon. I'm Billy Turriff, full-time property developer and investor. I'm really happy to be joined by my architect, Grant Erskine, today. This is one of a number of blogs/podcasts I'm going to be running when I'm going to be sharing with you some of the people I work with, but delving into a little bit about their own history and their own career, and just discussing some topical issues that are currently in the property world. So Grant, as I said, is my architect. I've worked with Grant on a number of projects both in Liverpool and in Manchester, really from the full spectrum of once I've kind of sourced what I think is a deal, is working with Grant to check the feasibility of it around planning, working with him around what the costs we think will be, and then taking him on board to help me through the planning process, select our build team, and then manage the build team. So great to have you here, Grant.
Good to be here.
Thanks. Do you want to maybe just tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so I suppose in really simple terms, came to Manchester in 2003 after working in an architect's office for 5 years to study architecture at Manchester School of Architecture. Qualified in 2010. I'd been working while studying. I was working for a big company called Building Design Partnership, sort of doing things like Liverpool One. They delivered all of that, the Rock and Berry, university complexes around the world. Really high level stuff. Recession hit in 2009. I'd been lucky to dodge 3 waves of redundancies, and I got caught in the 4th. They walked in one day and then they said, we've got to cut another 15 architects. And weirdly, or interestingly, I literally qualified on the Wednesday.
Okay.
And made redundant on the Thursday. And I...
Great start to your career then.
Yeah, it was. And as far as I'm aware, I'm the youngest RIBA chartered architect to launch their own practice.
Okay.
Literally on the Friday, 2010, I was 30 years of age. But it's sort of, it's interesting because most architects at 30 years of age only have a couple of years experience.
Yeah.
Because I went into an architect's office at 18, I'd sort of had 12 years experience by this stage. But it's sort of, the joke that I talk about, it's not a joke, it's reality, is my last job at BDP was working as a part of a team of 20, designing 10 square miles of Kuala Lumpur, skyscrapers and boulevards and everything else. And then the first job I did myself out of my back bedroom was converting it literally was a brick shit house. It was an outdoor toilet into a kitchen extension in Stratford. You don't get many opposite ends of the spectrum. And yeah, that was what, 10 years ago.
So it's almost 10 years ago then that you were running your own practice.
Yep. And we started in the height of the worst recession in memory, and back bedroom of a house, very small, grafting and hustling and taking on anything and everything that at that time that I could to get the company going. And that sort of ideology of we will help you with anything, we will deal with anything, it sort of stood us in good stead that as we grew, and I sort of 2 years in, took a little office in Manchester city centre, took on some staff, and we've grown and grown and grown, but that core ideology of being the problem solver, being almost what we talk about is the old school architect. It's not just the drawings; it's the full. We sit with the client and advise them at every stage. Has really pulled us up to a level where we're quite luckily in high demand.
So I think I saw you talk initially at one of Lisa Orne's events in London, and you kind of showcased a number of HMOs. And that was probably about 3-4 years ago. So to some extent, I was quite impressed in that there wasn't many architects that seemed to be really specialising with investors and talking about adding kind of additional rooms and being a bit innovative with space. But how, as you said, when you started off, you were doing a bit of everything, like most of us do when we start our own business. And obviously, since then you've got a strong social media presence, a lot of other investors in the area that work with you. How did you, I'm sure you used to work with a wide variety of clients, but you've also got a bit of a niche with investors and developers. How did that kind of niche come about?
Naturally. It just sort of, it evolved. So as as we took on more investor clients, and we are told that we are the HMO expert, which it's a bit of a double-edged sword because we don't think we're the HMO expert.
Yeah.
We work with investors, but HMOs have been so popular over the last 3-4 years that a lot of the investor-led stuff we get is HMOs because it's still the highest returns in investment. So we get people calling us up and saying, oh, you're the HMO expert, you're the ones that everybody talks about, you're the ones. And it's probably just to do with the volume that we've done, because we're fast approaching probably done over 100 HMOs now in the last couple of years. And nobody's anywhere near that sort of volume. But our work, we talk about it, our work falls into 3 categories. And it's not 3/3, but it's 3 categories. We talk sort of about private client, probably about 15% of our work is where we'll homeowners. It's usually your high-end, grand design type stuff. We can be very selective with that type of work. We only pick the stuff we want to do. Then sort of our next third, which is about 70% of our workload, is investor-led. So that's everything from your HMOs, your buy flips, your PD, your strategic land, your serviced accommodation, your apartments, your conversions, just anything that a client wants to make money out of.
Yeah.
That's what we help, and that's our niche. I don't know if it's the best way to say it, but it's what we attract because it's what we talk about, it's what we know for. And then the final third, which again is about sort of 15% of our workload, is what we call commercial and civic. So we're quite lucky at the minute. We've got a new build church on the books. We've got a mosque that we've just stuck into planning. We've just completed a big GN community centre. We've just done the drawings for a large charity headquarters, and we have a handful of shops and offices and stuff that we've done as well. And again, we're quite choosy and selective about the types of projects that we do. And it's sort of for selfish reasons in a way, but when I lecture at universities, I tell the students, nobody ever teaches you to specialise. At no point in your education will you learn to be a house architect or a shop architect. What happens is that you go into a job and you get pigeonholed and you get stuck, and before you know it, 10 years, 15 years have passed, and all you've ever done is hospitals.
Yeah.
As a business model, that is very, very fragile, because if that market slows, you're stuck. So we actively chase jobs that we've never done before. For the learning experience, for the knowledge, and some of my staff sort of say to me, well, when we're taking this over, we've never done this before, and I said, yeah, it's time to learn. At the end of the day, architecture it's a first principle profession. It's not we've always done houses, we can do houses. Light still moves in the same way, people still move in the same way, sound still travels in the same way. Architecture is a beautiful profession that if you embrace it correctly, you can do anything, and we prove that. Okay,
so on that, so I've got some specific questions I'd like to ask you and dive into, and you can feel free to answer them from a kind of an architect's perspective, or just your own experience in property. And knowing the way we both speak, we'll make sure we don't go over any of them for more than 5 minutes. Yeah. But based on really that last point that you said there about, in terms of people can do anything, and obviously things change, and it's one of the things I like about business, about property, in terms of how buildings transform. But certainly one of the latest changes in the market is what I would call the focus around co-living currently. And I'd be interested in your views, whether you see that as currently just a fad, is it just people doing more boutique HMOs, or is co-living more what people want in terms of the end user, or is it actually something that maybe investors such as myself are trying to push out there, not actually maybe being aware of how society wants to live?
Yeah, okay. And this is actually really interesting because you can get into the psychology of people. And it's funny because as Brits, we're quite weird compared to the rest of the world because we have an aspiration of how we'll live, and ultimately every Brit wants, or the majority of us wants, our own English country garden, for want of a better word to say it, barred house or detached front garden, double garage, back garden, and that's the aspiration. And actually living in any other way in Britain isn't that common. But if you go even a couple 100 miles south to Paris, people live their whole life in apartment complexes. And actually, a lot of people live their whole life. I think it's about 60% of people in Paris rent their whole life. They never actually own.
Yeah, and a lot of Eastern Europe's like that as well. Yeah. Germany's got a very similar market too.
Whereas in Britain, the aspiration is ultimately to own. So the co-living thing, don't think it will necessarily be led by desire, especially in Britain. I think it will be led by necessity.
Okay.
Really simply, we're not building enough homes. The price of property is going up. Incomes are not going up at the same rate. I honestly see within our lifetime there will be actually a full rethink of how families live together and how multi-families live together.
Yeah.
And you can already sort of start to see hints at it where you have people sharing amenity, different families sharing amenity. And I think you might start to see that happen more, where you will get almost cluster HMOs, where you'll have a family collective in their own private part, but the bits that they don't use all the time, so the likes of the kitchen and the bathroom and stuff, they'll start to overlap and share with others. And I think that will come through necessity, just with population growth and with lack of accommodation and what have you, that we'll actually start to look at alternative ways of living.
Yeah.
Not necessarily through choice, but through we're going to have to.
Yeah, I mean, it is, I think, quite an interesting subject. You know, kind of like everything, it's a bit of opposites, but you know, I mean, when I lived in the Middle East for a long time, you know, we had shared gyms, we had shared swimming pools, we had a kind of barn complex, we had shops, and it was a great way. It was a great way to meet people, and it was a great way to have a community. So I don't necessarily feel so much that it's a new trend within people, because it's, as you say, it's been going on in certain parts of the world for a long time. But there's a couple of other bits where I would be interested in your views. So, you know, I mean, can you do, when you do an HMO with 6 rooms, can you really do what have you seen there that people would say is co-living? Is it possible, or is it really left to the big build-to-rent operators, the likes of the Collective in London, where you're talking about the largest HMO in the world?
Yeah, to describe their HMO, because it sounds a hell of a lot better than saying I have an HMO. And I take a little bit of a pinch of salt. You know, somebody says, "Oh, my new co-living property," and it's a 4-bed HMO in wherever, and you go, "Okay, it is co-living, but it's not quite the co-living on the global scale." It was really interesting that I was reading a blog recently, and they were talking about the top 10 co-living places in the world.
Yeah.
It actually depressed me or disappointed me that not one of them was in the UK. In fact, I think the majority of them were not even in Europe. They were sort of elsewhere. But when you look at what these people are doing and how they actually are co-living, it is collectives, it is communes of people, maybe brought together through a combined ethos or an ideology. Maybe it's artists living together, but you start to see a lot more emphasis put on the shared space where they work, they eat, they cook, they live, and actually the bedroom, the bit that seems to be the value in the HMO, isn't the value in this. It's the ethos that, and your bedroom is just a place where you go to sleep, and actually you do live in the co-space. And I'm sure anybody who has a few HMOs will tell you that nobody actually uses the bloody living room.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's where you know, again, I've experienced what I'd call co-living in Dubai, and I certainly get that you can create good communities, but the way it was to some extent in Dubai, we still had our own apartment, so it was kind of, we could duck in and we could duck out. And I do think that maybe some people are just being a bit product focused with it. Because as you say, you know, one thing is, I spent a lot of time with HMOs, particularly getting the kind of the living room, the kitchen's nice, and interestingly in our professional ones, we don't find that they all go there. Most of them do stay in the rooms. Whereas in our student ones, there does seem to be that more of a community feel. But the other kind of aspect, I know from a time in the corporate world, I remember there was a big piece of research, and it was talking about how we're actually becoming more individualistic. You know, so I mean, I've just moved into a new house, knocked on all my neighbours' doors, managed to meet just one of them on, you know, quite a nice street, suburbs of Manchester, whereas when I was a kid growing up, you know, we all had the keys for, you know, 3-4 houses next to each other. So, yeah, I think it's like all things. I think in certain places with certain economics in London, the Collective, I think has obviously been very well, looks very well. I don't know the financial results, but I think, yeah, again, I would make a difference between providing services and opportunities than necessarily that idea that everyone will come together. But I also get your point regarding where the economic cycle will come in as well. You know, as the shortage of houses continue, having getting pushed down that way is probably going to be more and more common. Okay, so that's good for that question, thanks. The other question, when I kind of think of an architect, maybe this is a bit unfair of me, but I'll put it to you anyway. Like a lot of specialists, are kind of you get kind of two extremes, and I think I've probably, my feeling from working with different architects, I've had two extremes. So I maybe work with certain architects who it's almost like it becomes their house, and they want to design the best you can, maybe a bit like grand designs. Probably no respect for costs in it, but just want a great end product. And whilst always want a great end product, it's got to be commercially viable. At the same time, I've worked with other architects who have always been, right, let's just squeeze as many rooms as we can in here. We've got it at the minimum room size, we're at 6.5 metres. But there's no real thought to flow. Probably the work's been a little bit bad as well in terms of even some of the layouts, etc. So I suppose kind of question to an architect's flair, their role. Is it grand designs, or is it kind of build them high and sell them cheap?
It's a good question, and I suppose firstly, and this is something that I'll touch on very quickly, is a lot of people call themselves an architect and they're not. And then there's a whole gamut of everything from the guy who's got a free drawing package out of the back of a bloody cereal box, through to your guys doing foreigners for a bit of cash, through technicians, technologists, draftsmen, architects, etc. And there's a whole gamut. But even if you just take architects, as with take a room full of solicitors, you'll find the good one, you'll find the not so good one. I like to think all architects are good, but let's be frank about it. There'll be the range. And one thing I do say to clients, or potential clients, when they ask me how to choose an architect, I say, pick someone you've got a good relationship with, and pick somebody who perhaps has a perspective that matches your own. From my perspective, I suppose perhaps it's being maybe a little bit more business orientated and entrepreneurial. I come at every project from more of a product perspective than anything else. So it doesn't matter if you get it cheap, but if it's crap and you can't fill it, let's say an HMO for truck's sake, it's not a successful project. It doesn't matter, it's absolutely beautiful, stunning, high-end, fantastic. If it's went way over budget in achieving that, it's not a successful project. So it's almost like a balancing act between all the factors, which is often led by what the client wants out of it as well, that defines how the project runs. So in some cases, for example, we're doing an HMO and it's the client's very first one, and they want to really make a statement piece, and they want the sexy photos and everything else, and they blew the budget, but they want it to look wow. And then you get the client who's a bit more experienced, they've done a few of these, and they sort of realise that actually, at the end of the day, the only thing that's important is the perspective of the tenant. Can I rent this? Can I not? Does it make money? To make money, I've had to spend so much, it has to bring in so much. I don't want voids, I want people to live there. So it's the business plan. And in a lot of cases what we're doing is actually the business plan. It's not the design. The design is a very, very small part of what an architect does or can do. It's actually, it's a joke in our office. If I'm drawing, we've done something wrong. Because even though I'm now a chartered architect and else, it's not really worth my while to draw. A lot of what I do is advisory and consulting and managing and overseeing, but actually me physically drawing isn't that common anymore. It might be a quick sketch and then it's passed on to somebody else, or it might be marking up a drawing and passed back. But sort of the idea of an architect sitting labouring over a drawing for hours on end personally, I don't think it's a very true representation of how most of my profession is. But if an architect is doing that, I think they're quite out of touch with what the profession is and what the profession requires. And if you went back 50 years ago, that wasn't the profession either. And if you want to get into the politics of it, it's actually because architects as a whole have allowed themselves to become quite marginalised. So you can sort of go like the architect, then you've the project manager, and you've got the QS, and you've got the interior designer, and you've got into the 50 years ago, a lot of these people didn't exist, and actually it was the architect that was
held the glue together.
Doing all that. And I suppose that's how we've secured ourselves in the market, is actually by fitting into that old role, which a lot of clients want. That sort of, it's more than just, there's your drawings, go away.
Yeah, and with that, I mean, do you find as well some investors probably don't help themselves? I mean, I know that there's been times when I've probably looked at prices, and whether it's a builder, or whether it's an architect, or whether it's a solicitor, potentially gone with the cheaper option just because it is the cheapest one on paper, and then not really understanding what the implication is down the line.
Well, what I say is, if your architect's not making you money, why are you using them?
Yeah.
So they should be making you money. So they should be understanding your business, and they should be involved, and they should be there to make things easier. A prime example is there's a guy doing the rounds at the minute, and he's cheap.
Yeah.
He's very cheap.
It's not you then.
Thanks. And he's very cheap. And the deal sourcers like him. Because the deal sourcers aren't ultimately going to build the job. They're going to package it and they're going to flip it on. And we've been pulled in to fix quite a few of his jobs over the last sort of year or so. And they're shocking. And actually, his lack of understanding in simple construction terms. A prime example, we're doing 4 apartments. It's a change of use from a shop into like 4 apartments. And we picked our client bought the project with the planning, with the plans, with the building rights drawings, and pretty much said, can you deliver this? We don't generally do it, but he's an existing client, done quite a few bits for us, so we said yes. We've got it on site, and we realised that not one single dimension on the drawings relates to anything on site. But the actual implication of it is that, there's loads of them, but one that comes to mind is that we've got to get up a full floor, full flight of stairs in sort of about that much distance, which is just not physically possible. That's even too steep for a ladder, that would make it have to be sort of that pitch. And because it wasn't considered correctly in the first instance, the client is taking the hit on the costs of putting things right. And actually the knock-on implication of that is rooms getting smaller, major structural considerations have to be rethought, and it's actually a big problem. And in a way, the design is also almost the recipe for the cake. And if you get one part of the recipe wrong, the cake doesn't necessarily work.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think really, kind of picking on a couple of things you talked about there. Certainly, for me or to any investor, I think your bit about the flow is important, but it's also understanding what you want. So I think if it is your own personal home, it's maybe your residential home, and it's a home for life, and ultimately we all want to make money on it, but it's more about the family, it's more about how we're going to live. You may well take what I would call maybe one of the more grand design architects that can really be, you can't be innovative, but you're kind of very innovative and very creative. But at the same time, if you're doing, whether it's build to rent, of 100 units, or if it's an HMO, I think I certainly advise people to probably work with architects who've done a number of them, but not just, and it's the same with any industry, I wouldn't just go to the person and say, do you do HMOs, do you do build to rent? Because like most professions, everyone will say yes. It's really understanding from other investors what the architects brought to them, because I certainly, I didn't start using an architect till I worked with you properly. We did that model when we used to do a lot of HMOs. It was a copy and paste, and we had a very strong build team for that. So we were the cheapest architect you get. We just needed it for building control. We just needed it so with basic plans. And to be honest, I know the builders didn't even really look at them, but they were, that build team that we were using, we were putting on about 15, 20 a year of almost copy and paste. And what I would also say was that model was actually okay for that. It was under permitted development. We were going up into the roof, we were going out to the back. We actually knew the houses before we'd go in, we knew the streets. But like all things, as you said, there's good and bad. But there's also what's right for you as an investor at that time. But I think where I have found people getting caught out is where, and I've been caught out myself in some of my development ones, when I've let the architect run away with it, and not kind of control it. And then I've also seen, as you said, when someone pays it on the cheap.
Network meetings, that the biggest mistake he made was he was building 4 houses, and he let the architect have free rein on the 4th house. Okay. And he ended up building a house which was so far and away from what was suitable to the market that he lost a lot of money on that 4th house. And when he said that, I thought that's sort of interesting. And I would like to think that don't tar us all with the same brush, because at the end of the day, if that client's not making any money, he's not going to use you again as an architect. You've stiffed him, so you want to keep the architect or the client as profitable as possible. Because the more money is in his pocket, the more projects he does. It actually makes good business sense.
Yeah, no, and again, I mean, I remember working, well, I want to take you around the house I've just bought, and I was talking about doing some works to it, and I remember you actually kind of said to me, why do you want to do this? And, you know, kind of, you can convert this, you can do an extension, and your kind of first question to me was, where's the value? Are you actually going to make any money from it? And you talked yourself out of a job.
Well, so, yeah, but it's interesting what you say, because you've always had me as the sort of the investor architect. How I talk to an investor client is very, very different to how I talk to a homeowner client. And one of the things that I say to them in the first meeting, I'll sit down and chat with this, right? Because generally they'll ring in and go, I need more space. And in a lot of cases they actually don't need more space, they just need better rethinking of the space. And okay, maybe they need a little bit more, but they're thinking, I need loads more. But one of the things that we go through a process with them is we say to them, think about how you're going to live in this property now, when the work's done. Then let's say you have 2 kids, 7 and 8. When you're in 5 years' time, when your kids are 12 and 15, they're going to be totally different people. And again, 5 years after that. So if you're going to invest this money in your asset as your family home to live in forever, yeah, the cost is going to be the big implication, but actually designing something that you can adapt to and something that can adapt to you to allow you to live in for a long period of time is very important. And then when you take it from sort of the macro, you then go down to the micro and you say, okay, now I want you to think about how you're going to live in this property in the winter and in the summer, and how you move the stuff within it. We haven't actually talked about any design at this point. We're still talking about the mental picture of how they perceive themselves in it and how they live. And we ask questions like, do you have any weird hobbies? Because if, for example, one of them likes to play the drums or play the bagpipes, we'll design a space that they can go and play and nobody else has to listen to it, you know. And you can really influence how people live in a home and create a space that is very exceptional to them. I don't talk about it like that. I'm talking to an investor plan. At the end of the day, an investor plan, you're saying, okay, what is it you want to achieve? And 9 times out of 10, it's either cash flow or it's profit on exit. You know, and then we talk about how do we get to that, and then we talk about, okay, well, what is the project type? Is it going to be, for example, SA, or is it going to be HMO? And again, the brief is set from the aspiration of the client, but it's a lot more analytical with an investor, and it's a lot more, almost, we talk about being spreadsheet based, but it is numbers led to an extent. Whereas with a homeowner, it's a lot more emotional and heart led.
Yeah, so just with that, it kind of springs me off into 2 different ways. So I'll give you both kind of questions to the one here. So with, what's the best use of a building you've seen from an investor, either in terms of how they've converted it or a planning gain they've done, and then from what I'll call your residential customers or a homeowner, what's the most unique change or use of a room, extension, area, whatever you've seen from the residential side?
Okay, so the investor one, probably the one that I've spoken about a few times before. A client bought a house on a reasonable sized plot in Salford, and we got a planning and converted the house into an 8-bed HMO, very nice luxury 2-bed HMO. It had a big plot beside it, and actually, they hadn't really considered it, but that you couldn't have picked a better plot because there was nothing around it. It's wrapped on 2 sides by a park, so there's no overlooking, so there's no real planning limitations on it. Okay. So they got a project that stacked in its own right, and then they got a site for free that we've got a new built 6-bed HMO on as well. So for pure planning gain, they've got a free site where we're knocking up a 6-bed HMO, probably for the similar price to what we would do if we're doing a refurb, as a new build, sort of similar price. And there's lots of examples of that where we're being able to get an extra house in a garden, for example. We get this inquiry a lot. It doesn't actually work a lot. A lot of people think big garden, but generally it's either the house itself is killing the site or the neighbouring house is killing the site. But you know, we do on occasion get the infill house on the plot. And
that one in Salford, did the investor know when he bought the house in the plot that he was going to get the second one?
They hoped.
They hoped.
They hoped.
Okay.
Yeah. And it was when we sort of looked at it and went, yeah, actually we think it's got a really good shot. It still worked for them as the 8-bed. And they said, look, is there anything we can do with that that plot out there. And yeah, on the first sort of walk around, I quickly paced it out and went, yeah, I think we can easily get another 6-bed HMO on this.
And was that quite a surprise to them? Were they thinking they could just get like an extension on it?
Yeah, I think that was, it was one of those, they hoped they could get something but they didn't know quite what. And I think they're impressed, they're pleased that they've got another full 6-bed. And I've designed it in such a way that we could title split it. So they actually,
okay.
you know, it is a total self-contained house. That they title split it. That one.
And it's also good for their management perspective, so maintenance guys all next to each other, and I'm assuming fit out and stuff's relatively similar, so they'll probably get economies of scale. Okay, great. What about on the residential side?
Probably the one that jumps to mind is a house in Worsley a couple of years back, middle of the row, Victorian townhouse, sort of 4-storey high, that this family loved. And they had loads of big bedrooms, but actually didn't have great ground floor space. They had a sort of small, snug, a tiny kitchen and a lounge. And they had half of the back half of the property was a basement that I could just about stand up in, you know, sort of about 2 metres clear head height. And their motivation was that they wanted more common space. So actually, they originally were talking about knocking through on the middle floor. And the idea that I was actually like the third or fourth architect to go and see them. And the other three, he said, I'm bored of this, I'm getting the same sort of stuff over and over. And I sort of said, well, okay, if you want something really special, why don't we jack the whole house up and put a full basement in? And we dug out, and we ended up doing 2 metre deep underpinning. So the back half of the house was already clear, the front half was up full height. We dug that out as well. We put a big, large, full footprint house basement in. When you came to the back wall, there was a glass bifold door into a sunken courtyard with retaining walls all the way around and steps going up, out, and a glass bridge coming over, which brought you in from the floor above.
Wow.
Probably like it, I'm proud of it. It looked really nice. I remember having a conversation with them, just sort of having the business head on. That's in this house. I asked him how much is it worth, and it was sort of 650, 700. The works were going to cost, we estimate, around 150. And I said, I don't think you'll end up with an £800,000 house. You might.
Yeah.
But you've got to understand here that you're realistically, you might be looking at a 750, you might be dropping 50 grand here in your total asset. And they said they were happy with it because this was something that was motivating them to move. But because of their kids, one in the local high school, one in the local primary school, they wanted to stay in that direct area and they had friends and stuff in the area. Everything that gave them what they wanted in the area was at a price point that they couldn't achieve, you know, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4 million. So their perception was that they weren't living this for the next 20 years. This was their forever home. They wanted to make it the way they wanted it to be. Yeah. So they were happy, in essence, to get the £1 million plus house deliverable for the £800,000 price tag, which on the open market might have been 750.
Yeah. Have they sold it since? You know, they're still there.
And they love it.
Great.
Yeah.
Great.
Because I went back recently to help them out with that. They put a shed out the back. We stuck a shed out the back that doesn't fall within permitted development rights, and I did go and sort it out for them. But yeah, they absolutely love it.
Yeah. I mean, I must admit, as I said, I mean, one of the things I love about property is just the transformations. So whether it's the listed buildings we've worked on, kind of seeing them brought back to life, or even just what we're doing with little terrace houses, getting them into either mini-mos or HMOs. And I think being an architect, you must get a great opportunity in terms of seeing all that. You know, but at the same time, you know, I think what I would say to people, you know, whilst I recognise your architect skills, it is probably the more, I suppose, holistic approach you've got. So in terms of kind of helping me with the kind of the build team, managing the budgets along, you've got interior design flair like everyone else, which just adds complications to it at the end. And you know, I think again, just to people, I think when you need to work out who you're working with, ultimately you do need a broker, you need an accountant, you need an architect, a QS, etc. But sometimes some of these skills do cross over, and a lot of the time it is about the people. So I'd just like to thank you for your time today. It's been good to catch up. And if any listeners or viewers wanted to get in contact with you, what would be the best way?
Social media. I'm everywhere. If you type in my name, you'll find me. I'm not hard to find.
The architect is not shy of the camera. But it's actually quite interesting because, you know, whilst kind of if you think of how many of the interior designers you see about Facebook, you don't actually see that many architects utilising social media.
Architects are notoriously bad business people.
Yeah.
And it's funny, when I launched the practice, first 6 months trying to get work, I'm thinking, I'm an award-winning architect, why are people not knocking my door down? And I actually went and invested in my own business sense, and I spent a year doing a very intensive course to learn how to grow business, how to attract business, how to market, how to manage it, and everything else, because it is just another skill, ultimately, you learn. And I suppose, to a certain extent, I am quite outgoing, so it does sort of naturally fit with my personality. But at one point, we were the highest followed architects practice on Twitter. You know, but it's like, that's worth nothing now, but it is, and this is, I coach a few young architects who are trying to get their business going and trying to, and say, well, what do you do? And it's literally realize that you're not a designer, you are a service provider, and you're one of many, and you have to make your service so good that your clients keep coming back and they talk about you and everything else. And,
yeah, I know that's kind of one of Rob Moore's when he bangs the drum that, you know, if you're not doing marketing, you should be, because even if you think you've got enough work, why would you want to turn it down? And to stop and think about the main interview in that, because certainly the social media and the marketing has changed hugely. But maybe that's a topic for another chat. But great to see you, and as Grant said, you know, one of my friends on Facebook, Instagram, or just search him and you'll get him on social media.
Yep.
Thanks for your time.